He bit into Biscotti and collapsed before the second crunch. "Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. This mystery-loving community is amazing. Drop a comment with your location. It's always a treat to hear from you. Let's begin." When I swung open the heavy front door of the brownstone that morning, I wasn't expecting a crime to arrive wrapped in cellophane and ribbon. She was about 5'7" in heels, 30 if you were generous, and carrying a pastry box like it was wired to explode. "I was told you're the only one who could help," she said, voice crisp as a biscotti edge, "and that he doesn't come to the door." I took in the box first, then her, blonde, tailored, expensive in that understated Upper East Side way, like she paid extra to look like she didn't care. The pastry box had a gold-embossed label. That read Dolce Segreti, the kind of boutique bakery that sells $6 cannoli and trust fund tiramisu. I let her stand there just long enough to feel the weight of Wolfe's standard operating procedure. "He doesn't," I said. "But you're in luck." "I do." She hesitated. Then she gave me the kind of smile that starts arguments between cab drivers. "I'm not here for you, Mr. Goodwin." That earned her a lift of my eyebrow, not a full arch, but enough to register on the Richter scale. "Come in," I said. "But fair warning, he doesn't like surprises, visitors before noon, or desserts that require refrigeration." She stepped in and I shut the door behind her, sealing her fate and ours. "Mr. Wolfe is not a social animal," I said as I led her to the front room. "He's more like a decorative jungle cat. He doesn't pounce, but you still don't put your hand in the cage." She smiled again, but this one was thinner. "I'm not here to pet him." "You brought bait, though." "That—" Got no reply. She took a seat in the red armchair across from Wolfe's, perched like someone used to designer discomfort. I phoned in a line to the upstairs plant room, where Wolfe was finishing his morning orchid communion, and told him we had a client, unannounced, female, probably trouble. He gave me the kind of grunt that might mean, "Send her away," or "Bring her Biscotti." I decided to roll the dice. When Wolfe came down 10 minutes later, he was a mountain of disapproval in a mustard-yellow dressing gown, eyes scanning the pastry box like it was a coded message from his enemies. "Miss Serena Colville," she said, rising but not offering a hand. "Of Colville Imports. My father was Martin Colville." "Was," Wolfe echoed, lowering himself slowly into the big chair behind his desk. "You are here in a professional capacity, or filial?" "A little of both," he gestured. "Explain." Serena sat again and set the box delicately on the corner of Wolfe's desk, as though making an offering to a grumpy deity. 3 weeks ago, my father died. Peacefully, in his sleep heart failure. It wasn't unexpected. He was 78 and had survived 2 heart attacks already. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. "This is not a matter for police, then?" "No," she said. "Not police, but business. Specifically, sabotage." That made Wolfe open his eyes. I leaned forward a bit too, because it was the kind of word that made my ears perk up. "Go on," Wolfe said. "My father's company, Colville Imports, specialized in premium European food products, olive oils, cheeses, truffles, rare condiments, and yes, Biscotti." She nodded at the box. "He was grooming me to take over. I've worked there for 10 years, but since his death, things have shifted." "How?" "Our clients are vanishing. Shipments are misrouted. Recipes have been leaked. Our best-selling Biscotti, our proprietary chocolate hazelnut blend, was replicated perfectly by a competitor in less than 2 weeks." Wolfe sniffed audibly. "And you believe this is the result of internal betrayal?" "I know it is," she said. "But I don't know who. I have 3 senior executives who had access to the recipes, the supplier lists, and the distribution data. One of them sold us out, or is still doing it." I watched Wolfe's fingers twitch ever so slightly. He'd once said he had no interest in commerce, but he respected the elegance of good food and the treachery of ambition. "And this?" Wolfe asked, tapping the box like it might confess. A bribe. A sample. The original. Ours, I thought. It might interest you. Wolfe exhaled through his nose, a sound I'd learned to translate as, I'm pretending to be above this, but I'm actually intrigued. I am not a laboratory, he said. No, Serena said. You're something rarer. And why not go to the police? No crime, just betrayal, but it's costing me everything. Wolfe tapped his fingers once, twice, then turned to me. Archie, take Miss Colville's information. We will consider. That wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. I walked her out, took down the names of the 3 suspects she believed could be at the center of her crumbling Biscotti empire, and promised we'd be in touch. Back inside, Wolfe hadn't moved. His eyes were on the pastry box. She's hiding something, I said. No tears, no panic, but she looks like she's watching her own house burn and still thinking about the drapes. Of course she is, Wolfe said. She is in business. And business is rarely sentimental. But theft, he paused. Theft of an idea, of a flavor, of legacy. That is a personal affront. I raised an eyebrow. So we're taking the case? We are taking the box. He slid it an inch closer. The case depends. Depends on what? On whether the Biscotti is worth betraying someone over. I got back from walking Serena Colville to the door and found Wolfe leaning forward in his chair with the lid of the pastry box half raised like he was defusing a bomb. The look on his face wasn't pleasure. It was scrutiny. He plucked a Biscotti, with a pair of tongs sniffed it, then broke it in half and examined the cross-section like he was inspecting a crime scene. She said chocolate hazelnut, he murmured. She did, I confirmed. She also said someone knocked off the exact recipe in record time. You think it's possible? I think, Wolfe said. That flavor is a fingerprint, if one knows how to read it. He bit. A small, neat snap. He chewed once, twice, then let it sit on his tongue like he was waiting for it to confess. Real Piedmont hazelnuts, not Californian. Ground fine, not coarse. Chocolate's at least 70% cacao, Belgian or Swiss origin, not American. There's a hint of blood orange oil, very faint. Clever. I sat down opposite him. So it's the real thing. It is. Wolfe nodded once grimly. Which means that its sudden duplication is not a coincidence. It is either treachery or espionage. I opened my notebook. Colville gave us 3 suspects, all senior, all with access. Wolfe frowned. Names. I flipped a page. First, Edgar Smollett, head of distribution. Been with the company 12 years. Background in logistics and customs law. Ex-military, logistics corps, not front lines. A man who knows the value of systems and loopholes. Second, Annika Vaughn, product development director. She designed the packaging, branding, and recipe refinement over the last 5 years. Chemistry background. Used to work at a luxury perfume house, believe it or not. Not surprising, Wolfe muttered. Flavor and scent live in the same house and the same jealousies. Third, Marco Dell'Aria, consultant, was brought in last year to help with international expansion, Italy, France, Spain. Fluent in 5 languages. Former partner at an investment firm in Milan. According to Serena, charming as hell and twice as slippery. Wolfe didn't comment. He didn't need to. I could practically see the gears turning behind his eyes. Betrayal, when it happened in a family-run business, was more than crime. It was sacrilege. I'll need to speak with Miss Colville again, he said. Privately. That might take some finesse. She doesn't seem like the kind to hand over trust without a receipt. Then you will use finesse, Wolfe said flatly. A quality you possess when you remember it serves your purpose. Thank you, I said. I think, he gestured vaguely toward the kitchen. Bring Fritz one of those biscotti. He will confirm the flavor profile. I took one, careful not to touch the others. Wolfe's food hierarchy was stricter than most law codes. By the time I returned, Fritz had already begun issuing minor moans of approval from the kitchen. I took that as a sign he agreed with Wolfe's analysis, which meant we were looking at theft on a very refined level. And if there was one thing Wolfe couldn't abide, it was theft executed with aesthetic precision. That afternoon, I placed calls to the Colville Imports offices under the pretense of confirming Serena's appointments for the week. All three. Suspects were in town. Delaria had meetings scheduled for the next day at their supplier warehouse in Long Island City. Smollett had a weekly operations report to deliver in the morning. And Vaughn was prepping for the upcoming Spring Taste Panel event the company hosted each year to lure fancy grocers and high-end distributors. Wolfe, meanwhile, was reading an old Gastronome Quarterly with the kind of expression usually reserved for autopsy reports. When I updated him, he nodded but said nothing. That was typical. He was banking data, positioning pieces. I'd seen him do it 100 times. The moves looked slow, but when the trap shut, it did so with no warning and no wiggle room. "Tomorrow," he said eventually, "you will begin with Miss Vaughn." "Any reason?" "She is the artist, and artists guard their creations with a passion more dangerous than greed. If the recipe was stolen, she will feel the wound deepest." That made sense. It also meant she might be the most emotional and the most likely to slip. Early the next morning, I put on my best blend of charm and plausible credentials and showed up at Colville Imports headquarters, a minimalist grey building tucked on a quiet block in Tribeca that tried very hard to look like it sold software instead of biscotti. The receptionist gave me a once-over and decided I looked enough like I belonged. Within 10 minutes, I was ushered into Annika Vaughn's office. It looked like a high-end spice rack exploded. Shelves of sample jars, dried herbs, colored powders, vials of oils and extracts, all labeled in perfect calligraphy. The air smelled like vanilla and citrus with a backbeat of something smoky. She was on the phone when I entered, but she waved me toward a chair and kept talking in rapid French until she clicked the receiver down. "You're Archie Goodwin," she said. "Not a question. Serena told me you'd be sniffing around." "Well," I said, "since everyone's already talking about biscotti, I thought I'd join the tasting." She tilted her head slightly, assessing. Late 30s, sharp eyes, auburn hair pulled back with surgical precision. She had the air of a woman who measured everything, including me in grams and millimeters. "You don't look like a detective." I get that a lot, usually from people who end up telling me everything, a small smile. "Serena sent you to check my fingerprints, I assume?" "Let's just say I'm doing a recipe audit, and I figured I'd start with the person who actually made the recipe." She didn't deny it. "Yes, the chocolate hazelnut blend was mine. My team helped with calibration, but the core was mine. It took me 2 years to get the balance right. Orange oil was the final stroke." "So you're not thrilled someone copied it?" "That's diplomatic," she said. I was furious. "Still am. Anyone else on your team have access?" "My team works blind. Each technician only sees part of the process. Even my assistant doesn't know the full ratios." "Meaning?" "Meaning," she said, "someone had to reconstruct it from multiple parts, which only 3 people could do, me, Marco, or Edgar." "And how's the mood around here these days?" She crossed her legs. "Tense. Serena's trying to hold things together, but people are nervous and ambitious." That last word held weight. Ambitious like who? She hesitated. "Marco wants to expand to Paris and Milan. Big markets, big money. He's been pressuring Serena to franchise the brand. It would mean scaling up and scaling me out." I took that down in my head. "And Edgar?" "Cautious. Traditionalist. He worshipped her father. Doesn't like change. Or Marco." "What about you?" She glanced out the window. "I just want my work to be respected, not stolen." I thanked her, left a card, and told her I might circle back. On my way out, I called Wolfe from the car. She's proud, smart, and mad as hell, I said. If she's lying, she's hiding it behind professional pride. But she pointed a finger at Marco. Said he's angling to shove Serena out. Wolfe grunted. As expected. Return. I want you present for Serena's second visit. She's due. At 4. Back to the jungle, I said. Anything you want me to ask her? Yes, he said. Ask her what she hasn't told us. I smiled. Subtle. No, Wolfe said. Necessary. Serena Colville arrived just after 4, punctual enough to be respectful, late enough to remind us she had other appointments that mattered. She wore a slate-grey coat over a black blouse and pants that could probably outprice my weekly salary, but she moved like someone who didn't want attention. Shoulders squared, steps neat, eyes forward. This time she didn't bring pastries, just a slim leather folder and the same guarded expression. Fritz showed her into the office. Wolfe had already stationed himself in his oversized chair, arms folded across his middle like a particularly stubborn Buddha. I leaned against the wall, notebook in hand, trying not to look too expectant. Serena sat across from Wolfe again, but this time there was no warm-up, no Biscotti, no polite deflections. You've spoken to Annika, she said. Yes, Wolfe replied. And I will speak to the others, but you, Miss Colville, have not yet told us the entire truth. That caught her. Her mouth moved slightly, not quite a smile, not quite a protest. I've told you what I know. Wolfe shifted his weight by about half an inch, which, for him, might as well be slamming his fist on the desk. No, you've told us what's convenient. Now you will tell us what's relevant. She exhaled, a sharp breath. Then she opened the leather folder and placed a page on Wolfe's desk. I stepped forward to read it over his shoulder. A legal document. Partial. A revised shareholder. Agreement dated just 5 weeks before Martin Colville's death. At the bottom, Serena's name, and another name, Marco Delaria. Wolfe didn't look up. Explain. My father never wanted to go public, Serena said. Never. He believed the business should stay in the family, but before he died, he changed his mind. You didn't. No, she admitted, I still don't. But I signed because I had to. He was clear. If I didn't agree, he'd appoint Marco as CEO. And now? Now the agreement's still in effect. I can't undo it unless I prove one of the signatories acted in bad faith. Marco, Wolfe said flatly. Yes. Wolfe tapped the folder. Does Annika know about this? No, Serena said. Neither does Edgar. Only Marco and I were involved. My father kept it quiet. Wolfe glanced at me. Well, she said Marco's been pressuring her to scale up, franchise, take the brand global. He wants money, Wolfe muttered, and he wants power. But does he want to destroy the product to get it? Serena leaned forward. That's the thing, he's not destroying it, he's replicating it, without the constraints, lower quality ingredients, wider markets. He wants to cash in on what we've built, even if it means hollowing it out. So he's selling the illusion of quality, I said. He's selling the name, she corrected. Wolfe raised a brow. And he had access to the recipe? Insisted. Said he needed full transparency to advise on scaling. I pushed back, but my father agreed. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. Foolish. Serena didn't respond. Wolfe reached for the folder and tucked it under a blotter on his desk. We will continue. But you must understand, Miss Colville, we do not serve justice to the highest bidder. If your father signed away control to an opportunist, it was not a crime. If someone sold your formula, it may be. Her jaw clenched. And if it was Marco, then we will expose him, Wolfe said. But not because you wish it. Because he has earned it. She stood, spine straight. I want what's mine protected. No, Wolfe said. You want what was yours reclaimed. That is a different thing entirely. I walked her out again. She didn't speak until we hit the stoop. You think I'm wrong for wanting to stop him? I think, I said. You're not used to people questioning your reasons. She turned, gave me a measured look. You sound like him. That's the job. After she left, I returned to find Wolfe with his eyes closed. Not sleeping, never during an active case, just cataloguing, sorting. Somewhere in that massive brain of his, the crumbs were forming a pattern. She's not lying, I said. She's holding on by her fingernails. Yes, Wolfe murmured. But she is also staking her pride on vengeance. That colors the palette. Annika didn't know about the shareholder agreement. That means the competition was blindsiding her too. And Smollett? Tomorrow, I said. I've set up a meeting. Wolfe nodded. We must tread carefully. If Marco is guilty, he will not act hastily. But if he suspects we are closing in, he may accelerate. And what if it's not Marco? Then, Wolfe said, we must ask why someone would frame him. And who gains most if suspicion destroys him before the truth emerges? That night I couldn't sleep. Something about the whole setup was beginning to itch at the back of my brain. Serena was hiding things, yes, but she wasn't hiding guilt. Not the kind I recognized anyway. She was angry, not afraid. And people who aren't afraid either have nothing to lose or think they've already lost it. The next morning, I arrived at Colville Imports again, this time to meet Edgar Smollett. He was waiting in the loading bay, clipboard in hand, boots scuffed, and a cup of black coffee that looked more punishment than refreshment. The man looked like he'd been carved from rebar. Late 50s, wire-frame glasses, jaw like a concrete mixer. You the detective? Close enough, I said. Archie Goodwin. He didn't shake my hand, just gave me a once-over and motioned me inside. We walked the warehouse floor while workers moved crates of oils and tins of delicate crackers past us like contraband. You think someone sold us out, he said after a minute. Serena told me you're sniffing around. She also say, who? She didn't have to. He stopped by a stack of sealed pallets. Marco, it's always Marco. He's got that investment firm smirk and a dozen words for synergy. Wants to run the place like a trading floor. You got proof? No, he admitted. But I've seen the shipments. Ingredients are changing. Cheaper oils, off-brand nuts. My men don't like it. Could be supply chain hiccups. Hiccups don't change invoices. Someone's buying crap and marking it up as the original. I made a note. And you've told Serena. Of course, she's not blind, but she's boxed in. Legal mess. Shareholder threats. She doesn't trust anyone. I nodded. What about Annika? She's honest, temperamental, but clean. If someone stabbed us, it wasn't her. Could it have been someone outside the top 3? No, Smollett said. Only 4 people had the full access to. Reverse engineer that recipe. You're looking at 3, the 4th's in the ground. I returned to the brownstone around noon. Wolfe was still in the office, now with a second biscotti broken in quarters on a white plate, each piece paired with a different jam. No comment. I talked to Smollett, I said. He hates Marco's guts, thinks someone's changing the product using cheaper stuff but selling it under the brand. Diversion, Wolfe said. You think Smollett's the one? No, but I think he's telling the truth he knows, which may not be the truth that matters. I sat down. So who's the mastermind? Wolfe didn't answer, not yet. Instead, he reached for a second folder, one I hadn't seen before, and opened it. Inside, supplier invoices, dated 3 weeks apart. And 2 identical product names with different origin points. Archie, Wolfe said calmly, someone has used Serena Colville's grief to hijack her company. The betrayal is real, but the culprit has not yet been named. I leaned forward. So who tampered with the tin? He looked up, his gaze sharpening. That, he said, is our next step. It was just past 2 when Wolfe rang for me from the office. I had been upstairs reorganizing the files, my version of pretending to be productive when the bell buzzed. When I walked in, he was in position. Chair, desk, glare, and a fresh cup of beer so dark it could have doubled as printer ink. There has been, he said without preamble, a trespass. I stiffened. You didn't throw that word around lightly. In Wolfe's brownstone, the man had rules, borders, and invisible fences. A trespass wasn't a mishap, it was a violation. Where? I asked, immediately scanning the room. He gestured toward the narrow wooden spice rack just beyond the office door, tucked beside the hallway leading to the kitchen. Fritz stocked it himself, and Wolfe had approved every jar down to the last. Bay leaf. He'd once nearly fired a man for replacing Wolfe's Turkish marjoram with Greek. I stepped closer. The rack didn't look disturbed. No gaps, no toppled jars. I'd seen it 100 times. Still, Wolfe's eye caught detail like a sniper's scope. Tarragon, he said. I looked. The jar was there. 3rd row, leftmost. Label neat. Cap tight. What about it? He leaned back. It has been opened and used. Fritz. Absolutely not. He was with me until 1:30. And I have not left this chair. You returned at noon. Who else was in the house? Just you, me, and... Fritz, Serena was here yesterday. You don't think... No, he said. Miss Colville would not risk impropriety on my ground, nor would she know to choose something as subtle as tarragon. I picked up the jar and unscrewed the cap. The scent hit immediately. Pungent. Floral, a little sharp. Not something you'd mistake for mint or basil. Why tarragon? Because it does not overpower, it suggests, which means whoever took it knew flavor. Annika? I asked. Possibly, Wolfe allowed. But she would not need to steal, she creates. Someone else wanted to compare, not invent. Marco. Wolfe tapped the arm of his chair. Or someone framing Marco, which is worse. I looked down at the spice jar. How sure are you it wasn't Fritz? He doesn't cook lunch with tarragon on a Thursday. Never has, never will. I had to admit that tracked. Fritz was many things, but spontaneous wasn't one of them. Wolfe laced his fingers together. The incursion is small, but it proves something. That someone wants your palate, I said. He nodded once. Which means they know I can uncover what the tongue remembers. And you think they used it to test the Biscotti? No, Wolfe said. To test me. That made me stop. He was right. Whoever used that jar didn't steal a recipe. They planted a flag. It was a message. They were watching, listening, probing. You want Panzer? He hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I want him to follow Marco. From this evening forward, discreetly. I made the call, gave Saul the background without too much flavor, and arranged for him to start tailing Marco from the Colville offices at 6 Arxel. If Marco so much as stopped to sniff a cinnamon roll, we'd know. Back in the office, Wolfe turned to another sheet of invoices. Side-by-side lists of hazelnut shipments, one Italian origin, one Romanian. The Romanian ones had started appearing 2 weeks after Martin Colville's death. Different supplier, slightly cheaper, and listed under the same product name. Counterfeit ingredients, I said, scanning the headers. Legally ambiguous, Wolfe replied, but ethically fraudulent. It may not be Marco's signature on the order forms, but he benefits. And Serena. Not yet aware, I believe. Smollett mentioned changes, but not specifics. I closed the invoice folder. We've got motive and method. What we're missing is the middleman. Wolfe's eyes glinted. Yes, the person who connects the warehouse to the theft. Someone who understands the product, the brand, and the chain of custody. It hit me. The assistant. Wolfe smiled. A bare curve, but there it was. Annika's assistant, I said, reaching for my notebook. Serena said she didn't know the recipe, but she could have assembled it piece by piece. And if she's being cut out of the expansion, she has motive, Wolfe said, and opportunity. And maybe access to this house. I blinked. How would she get in? Wolfe leaned forward. You let Serena in. It clicked. She could have left something. A note, a key, a planted suggestion. If she's in on it, then Miss Colville, Wolfe said, is not merely a client. She is bait. The buzzer rang. Fritz appeared in the doorway. "There is a Mr. Delaria here to see you." Wolfe sat very still. "Unexpected." "Want me to turn him away?" I asked. "No, show him in." Marco entered like he belonged there. Tailored jacket, perfectly styled hair, smile engineered for maximum disarmament. He looked around the office with professional curiosity, like he was appraising our furniture for resale. "Mr. Wolfe," he said. "Mr. Goodwin, I hope I'm not intruding." "Sit," Wolfe said. Marco did. He crossed one leg over the other and rested his hands delicately on the armrests as if the chair might bruise. "I heard you've been making inquiries," he began. "You heard quickly," Wolfe replied. Marco's smile thinned. "Well, it's a small industry. Word travels. Truth, however," Wolfe said, "moves slower." Marco inclined his head. "We all want the same thing, the company to thrive. If Serena is panicking, I assure you it's unnecessary. There's no sabotage, just adaptation." "To Romanian hazelnuts?" I asked. His mouth twitched. "We are optimizing supply, same product, different source." "Not the same product," Wolfe corrected. Marco turned to him. "With respect, I think you're clinging to nostalgia." "No," Wolfe said calmly. "To integrity." Silence. Marco didn't fidget, but the smile faded entirely. "You came here for a reason," Wolfe said. Marco paused. "Yes. I want to offer you a retainer. To resolve this internally, quietly. I'm prepared to be generous." "No," Wolfe said. Marco blinked. "I beg your pardon. You cannot purchase what I already possess. Independence. Now get out." Marco stood, anger leaking through his polished exterior. "You're making a mistake." "No," Wolfe replied. "You are. Good day." I saw him out. Marco didn't say another word, but his look promised we'd hear from him again. When I came back, Wolfe was already dialing. "Panzer will follow him tonight," he said. "But you will visit Annika again. Ask about her assistant." "You? Think she'll crack?" "I think," Wolfe said. "She doesn't know she's in danger, and that makes her useful. I met Annika Varn just before closing. She was in her test kitchen, sleeves rolled up, a new biscotti in her hand." "Back again?" she asked, dry. "Just tying up loose ends. You mentioned your team works blind. Who coordinates the components?" She frowned. "My assistant, Lucy." "Why? Mind if I talk to her?" "She's not in today. Family emergency." I raised an eyebrow. "Convenient timing," she stiffened. "What are you implying?" "Just wondering who would benefit from your secrets." Something shifted in her expression, just a flicker, then gone. "I trusted her," she said. "I trained her myself. She watched me build that recipe." "Did she ever visit your home, borrow a key?" "No," Annika said firmly. "Then, well, she once delivered samples for a tasting," Serena asked her. "And she ever mentioned coming here to Wolfe's place?" "No, but if she did..." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. I returned to the brownstone and filled Wolfe in. He nodded. "Tomorrow," he said, "we summon them all." "The office gathering?" "Yes, Miss Colville, Mr. Smollett, Miss Varn, Mr. Delaria. And if we can find her, Lucy." "And what if Lucy doesn't come?" Wolfe leaned back. "Then we already have our answer. At 11:04 the next morning, the brownstone became a temporary courthouse, minus the robes and gavels, plus a few uncomfortable silences and one very attentive orchid. Wolfe had spent the early hours drafting formal invitations, not on paper, but through a series of precisely worded phone calls that bore his usual tone, not quite polite, never optional. By mid-morning, the suspects arrived, one by one. Serena. Colville came first, dressed in pale green silk and nerves. She nodded at me curtly and went straight to her usual chair, hands folded tightly in her lap. Edgar Smollett followed, punctual as predicted, a file folder under one arm and suspicion in his eyes. Annika Varn came next, hair pulled into a sleek bun and lipstick sharp enough to cut glass. She didn't sit, she perched. And finally Marco Delaria, half an hour late, unapologetically. His expression said he'd rather be anywhere else, and preferably with fewer accusations in the air. Only Lucy was missing. She didn't respond, Annika had told me on the phone that morning. Her phone's off. She's not at her apartment. I went by. Wolfe accepted this information with a barely perceptible nod, which in his language translates to "as expected." We were not in need of a fugitive. We were in need of a trigger. I stood near the bookshelves, notebook open, and watched Wolfe open the proceedings with the precision of a chess master laying out the board. "You are all here," he said, "because something has been taken, not only from Miss Colville, but from each of you. You've been betrayed, some knowingly, some not, but all to varying degrees." Marco opened his mouth, but Wolfe silenced him with a flick of the hand. "You will not speak until I indicate. You've had your chance to lie. Now I speak and you listen." Wolfe turned his gaze toward Serena. "You came to me claiming sabotage, that your family's Biscotti, your legacy, had been stolen and replicated. You believed it was one of 3 people." Serena's jaw tensed. "Yes, but you neglected to tell me something crucial," Wolfe went on, "that you and Mr. Delaria had signed a private agreement granting him co-ownership in the event of your father's death, a document your father drafted, but which you agreed to, albeit reluctantly." Marco smiled faintly. "Hardly a crime." "No," Wolfe said. "But what you've done with that power is," he turned now to Annika, "you created the Biscotti recipe. With obsessive care, I might add. The inclusion of blood orange oil, the fine grind of the hazelnuts, these are not choices a machine would make. But someone knew your process, observed it." Annika's mouth opened. "Lucy—" "Precisely," Wolfe said. "Your assistant, Lucy Darnell, had access. You trusted her. She carried samples, reviewed supplier lists, coordinated blind tests. She did not need the entire recipe. She merely had to assemble the fragments, which she did, over time." Annika looked sick. "I should have—" "No," Wolfe interrupted gently. "She was chosen for her skill, not your failure." He looked now to Smollett. "Mr. Smollett, you noticed changes in the invoices, supplier origins, quality downgrades. You saw the pattern but not the hand. Because the hand was hidden beneath Marco's insistence on scaling up and global efficiency." Marco shifted in his chair. "If you're accusing me of smart business, I am accusing you," Wolfe said sharply, "of suborning, theft, and manipulation. You did not steal the recipe yourself. You allowed someone else to do it, and in return, you promised them reward, position, money, security." Serena turned to look at Marco, eyes blazing. "You used her. She volunteered," he snapped. "She hated being Annika's shadow. She wanted out. I gave her away." Wolfe nodded. "So you admit knowledge?" Marco scoffed. "The recipe wasn't even copyrighted. It was a formula, a flavor. You can't steal an idea." "Incorrect," Wolfe said. "You can. And you did. You used Lucy to bypass your competitors. You took the core product, altered the sourcing to save cost, and prepared to scale it without permission or quality control." He turned back to Serena. "And Miss Colville, whether by negligence or distraction, you signed away control to a man who does not value what your father built. But worse, you lied to me. Not about your intentions, but about your position. You came not merely for justice, you came for leverage." Serena looked ashamed. "I wanted to stop him." "You wanted to outmaneuver him," Wolfe corrected. "But justice is not a tool, it is an end." There was silence. Then Wolfe spoke again, voice low but resonant. "2 nights ago, someone entered my home. They tampered with my spice rack, specifically the tarragon." Serena looked up. "What?" "Yes," Wolfe said. Someone tested me. Left a mark. I examined the fingerprints on the jar this morning. The set did not match mine or Fritz's. They belonged to a woman. He didn't need to say Lucy's name. The implication hit like thunder. Annika blinked rapidly. She came here. She did, I said. While Serena was here, she likely slipped in, tested the flavor, maybe left behind the modified version. Marco needed confirmation. If Wolfe approved of the knockoff, even unknowingly, they could launch the new line with impunity. Marco sat back. You have no proof? No. Wolfe gestured to me. I opened a manila envelope and passed it to Marco. Inside, copies of shipment records, supplier emails, and one internal memo from Lucy Darnell to Marco, labeled Confidential. Biscotti Variant B, shelf test results. Marco stared at it, face blank. Smollett leaned forward. Where did you get that? Lucy's email archive, I said. She left her laptop behind at her apartment. Seemed she was in a hurry. Wolfe spoke again, final and cold. You may not fear legal consequence, but you will face moral consequence. Miss Colville has the documents. She can terminate your agreement through breach of fiduciary duty. Your empire ends here. Serena looked at Wolfe, eyes wide. How did you get all this? I listen, he said simply. More than that, I taste and I think. Wolfe leaned back, closing the file. Miss Colville, I suggest you do not rebuild the company on secrets again. Hire a lawyer. Hire a forensic accountant. Hire, if you must, an assistant, but this time one who believes in Biscotti more than boardroom coups. She nodded slowly, stunned. Marco stood without a word and walked out. Annika followed, dazed. Smollett lingered long enough to mutter, "Thank you," before he left too. The room went quiet. I turned to Wolfe. Well, I said. That was neat. He grunted. It was inevitable. Lucy, gone, but not lost. Saul will find her. I sat back down. You think Marco was going to fire her once the deed was done? Wolfe shook his head. No, I think he was going to promote her. Which is worse. Dinner that night was veal with tarragon cream, served, with an apology from Fritz, though he hadn't done a thing wrong. Wolfe chewed slowly, savoring. This, he said after a long pause, is the real thing. I'll take your word for it, I said, dunking my own biscotti in coffee. He looked at me. Mr. Goodwin, he said, betrayal is like overcooked garlic. Once detected, it cannot be undone. It can only be acknowledged and never repeated. I raised my cup. To flavor, I said. Wolfe nodded once. To truth. It was nearly midnight when Saul Panzer called. He doesn't call unless he's got something, and he never has to say, "You're not going to like this," because he assumes I won't. He just gives you the news like a scalpel gives you stitches. Clean, sharp, fast, and a little numbing until it's over. She slipped me, he said. I blinked awake, standing in the hallway outside my room, phone cold against my cheek. Lucy. She doubled back through a hotel kitchen off the avenue. I lost her in the service corridor. She was carrying a duffel, no phone signal. I think she had help. Marco? No sign. But she was meeting someone. Dark coat, sunglasses, too warm for the weather. He knew the layout. Any guesses? One, Saul said. And you're not going to like it. I didn't. I liked it even less when he told me who. By the time I got off the phone, Wolfe was already up. He didn't wear pajamas. He wore disdain for disruption. He was sitting in the office, robed and barefoot, sipping black tea that Fritz had likely been summoned to prepare with the care of a midnight ritual. You will tell me, Wolfe said, eyes narrow. Saul lost her. Unacceptable. She was prepared. Used the hotel's service entrances, met someone. He was fast. Looked like a pro. Wolfe's face didn't change, but I knew the silence. He was cataloguing. Name, he said. I sighed. Vincent Rugg. He said nothing, which in Wolfe's vocabulary was its own sentence. Vincent Rugg, former importer, minor league smuggler, major league networker. He knew the food trade like a butcher knows a carcass, where the meat is and where the rot hides. He'd been forced out of business 5 years ago after a quiet but thorough investigation by the FDA and a few discreet visits from certain unnamed agencies. Officially, he ran consulting operations in supply chain security. Unofficially, he helped people disappear ingredients, records, and reputations. He's been circling the industry again, I added. Probably helping Marco with the expansion. I bet he backed the Romanian supplier deal. Wolfe tapped a finger slowly against the teacup. Then Lucy is not fleeing. She is relocating. I nodded. She's not hiding. She's being repositioned. A pawn promoted to queen. Wretched metaphor, Wolfe muttered, but accurate. Continue. Smollett's already filing paperwork with Serena's counsel. She's terminating Marco's stake. But if Lucy resurfaces in Milan or Lisbon with a new company and a tweaked version of the Biscotti, the theft succeeds. Legally, I asked. Morally, Wolfe said. That is the only standard that matters. I took a deep breath. So what do we do? He looked up. We bait the thief. The next morning, I arrived at Colville, imports with a fresh copy of Wolfe's plan in my head and a faint tick in my right eye. Serena met me in the tasting room, a sleek, steel and stone shrine to edible branding, and listened without interrupting. You want me to announce a new product? She asked, incredulous. Yes, I said. One that doesn't exist. Wolfe calls it the negative variant. She blinked. Come again? Say you've developed a new version of the Biscotti, a variation that's patented and chemical profiled. Publicly announce it. Quietly leak that you've already begun shipping to a limited test market. France, probably. That'll spook anyone preparing to launch a fake version of the original. And? Roux's job is to stay ahead of threats. If he thinks you're preparing to defend the formula with legal teeth, he'll blink. He'll have to. And if Lucy's watching, she'll reach out. Serena folded her arms. You're asking me to play bait. No, I said. You're already bait. We're just changing what the trap smells like. She was quiet for a long moment, then, Fine, but if this backfires... It won't, I said. I lied. It might. The press release went out that afternoon. Subtle, slick, full of biotech-flavored jargon that meant nothing and sounded expensive. I watched Serena deliver it on a call with a French trade journal, her voice smooth as crème anglaise. No details, just hints, a proprietary variant, trademark pending, bioactive stabilization, all buzz, no bite. By 6 p.m., Wolfe was leaning forward in his chair, one brow arched. Now, he said, we wait. We didn't wait long. At 9:17 that night, Saul Panzer rang the bell and stepped into the front hall with a plain white envelope in his hand. No name, he said. Courier dropped it at the Colville building, said it was for the person in charge, addressed in block letters. Wolfe took it like it was radioactive. He slit the envelope open with a bone-handled letter opener and removed a single, printed page. I stood behind him as he read, then reread. What is it? I asked. He passed it to me. No header, no sign-off. Just 12 words. We don't need your permission to make what was already ours. That's a confession, I said. No, Wolfe said, that's an announcement. I stared at the page. You think Lucy sent it? Of course. The phrasing is hers. Ruch does not write in metaphor. He'd use numbers. This is emotional. Defensive, proud, meaning she thinks she's the rightful heir. Exactly, Wolfe said. She believes Annika ignored her, that Serena never saw her, that Marco used her but promised recognition. She's not afraid anymore. I said, she's declaring war. Then she must be cornered. Wolfe looked at me. Call Annika. Tell her to meet you at the test kitchen tomorrow morning. Tell her to leave the back door unlocked, and tell her to pretend, just for 2 hours, that she believes Lucy wants to apologize. Annika met me just after 9, jittery but game. The test kitchen was empty, the back door propped with a magnetic wedge that wouldn't be noticed from outside. "She's not going to come," Annika said for the 3rd time. "She will," I said. And she did. At 9:47, I heard the whisper of shoes against tile. I was behind the divider, notebook in hand. Annika stood near the prep table, arms crossed, pretending to tidy the ingredients shelf. Lucy stepped in. She wore black. No makeup, no bag. Annika froze. Lucy spoke first. "You made a mistake." Annika turned. "You think this was yours?" "I made it," Lucy said, stepping closer. "I watched you mix every ingredient. I saw what you ignored. I fixed it." "By stealing it?" "I completed it. That's when I stepped out." "Hello, Lucy." She whirled, went pale, then folded her arms. "You can't prove anything." "No," I said. "But I don't have to. You did." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope she'd left. She stared. "You wrote this," I said. "To scare Serena, but you forgot one thing." "What?" "The ink." I smiled. "Specialty thermal reactive stock. Wolfe had Fritz apply it with steam. Your fingerprints are on it." Her face cracked. "Ruck's good," I added, "but not good enough to wipe yours off a thermochromatic card." Lucy lunged for the counter, too slow. I blocked her gently but firmly. She froze. "It's done," I said. She looked at Annika. "You left me behind." Annika looked at her. "You walked away." Wolfe listened to the retelling in silence. "When?" "I was done," he merely nodded. "Fritz," he called. "Veal ragout." Dinner came with silence and satisfaction. After dessert, Wolfe leaned back, content. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "there is no such thing as a perfect imitation. There is only one original, and those desperate enough to believe they deserve it." I poured myself a 2nd cup of coffee. "Like Biscotti," I said. "No," Wolfe murmured. "Like people." Lucy Darnell didn't say much on the way to the station. She sat in the back of the unmarked car, sole arranged, spine stiff, eyes forward, hands folded tightly in her lap. I rode shotgun and kept my mouth shut. Not out of mercy, but because I knew Wolfe would want her voice fresh when the time came, and Lucy, to her credit, looked like someone saving her breath for the final act. She wasn't cuffed. There were no formal charges yet. Serena wanted to press theft, Annika wanted an apology, and Wolfe wanted truth. Only one of those things could be coaxed into a confession without ruining its value. So we brought her back to the brownstone, not under arrest, not exactly a guest. "You're giving her the velvet treatment?" Saul had asked. "No," I said. "We're giving her the chance to bury Marco before Marco buries her." And that, Wolfe would argue, was an act of moral efficiency. When we arrived, Fritz let us in with his usual neutral nod. Lucy didn't glance at the foyer, the walls, the grand staircase. She didn't care. She followed Saul into the office like someone walking into a dentist's chair, sat where Wolfe pointed, and stared at the rug. I was already at my usual post, notebook open, pen ready. Wolfe didn't speak at first. He just looked at her, studied her, the way he sometimes studied. A recipe Fritz was testing for subtle variations. Lucy didn't blink. "You understand," Wolfe said finally, "that this is not a courtroom." "I know, and I am not a judge." She nodded. "But I can offer you something," Wolfe continued. "Not freedom, but clarity. And clarity is worth more than freedom, because it can't be revoked." Her voice was quiet. "You're not interested in punishing me." "No," Wolfe said. "Punishment is often a waste of potential, but understanding, that is never wasted." Lucy lifted her eyes. They were tired and sharp. "I didn't do it to hurt anyone," she said. That is false, Wolfe said evenly. You did it to hurt the people who overlooked you. The people who in your mind hoarded recognition and left you invisible. You wanted to be seen. She inhaled once, like bracing for a dive. I didn't mean for it to go that far. She said, I wanted to show her, Annika, that I was just as good. You were better at watching, Wolfe said, but not better at tasting. That is the flaw. I scribbled that one down. She knew I helped, Lucy said. She just never said it, never gave me credit. So you partnered with Marco? No. Her voice sharpened. He found me, said he'd been watching, said I deserved more. And he offered you what? Wolfe asked. Equity. A lead position in the new venture. He said we'd move to Milan, start fresh. He'd handle the investors, I'd run product development. Wolfe nodded once. And Ruch? Marco's contact. I didn't know his name at first, just someone who could make paperwork vanish. Help set up dummy suppliers. You knew the hazelnuts were being swapped. I did the testing. Lucy admitted. Tried to match the flavor, got close but not close enough, Wolfe murmured. She didn't answer. You left a note, Wolfe said. The envelope you delivered to Colville Imports. It wasn't a warning, it was a manifesto, a declaration. She flushed. I meant every word. You still do. Yes. Wolfe closed his eyes. Then you will tell the truth. Fully. You will sign a statement. Not for the police, for Serena and for Annika. Not because you must, but because the theft, now uncovered, is only half the harm you caused. He opened his eyes again. You stole pride, and when that is taken, it must be restored deliberately. Lucy sat for a long time, then slowly she nodded, I'll sign. By the time Saul drove her back to arrange the paperwork, the brownstone had quieted. Fritz brought her slices of chilled pear tart with lemon glaze, and Wolfe ate his in rare silence. When I finished mine, I leaned back. You think she'll testify? If it comes to that? She will not be needed, Wolfe said. Marco has already lost everything he hoped to gain. You're sure? Wolfe gestured toward the folder on the desk. Inside, the shareholder agreement Serena had rescinded, signed and stamped with legal termination. Annika's reinstatement as product lead. Smollett's formal report detailing the fraudulent supplier swaps. And Lucy's confession, drafted, reviewed and signed in the presence of a witness. Marco's venture, Wolfe said, was always predicated on secrecy. Exposure is its death knell. I nodded. And Ruch? Slippery, Wolfe said, but he will disappear. That is his instinct. I still don't get something, I said. Lucy came in here to test your palate to see if you could tell the difference. Why not just send the Biscotti directly? Wolfe smiled faintly. She didn't want the product tested. She wanted herself tested. She needed to know if what she created could fool me. That would prove she'd succeeded. In her mind, I was the last gatekeeper. And when you didn't take the bait, she knew she'd failed. I exhaled. That's brutal. No, Wolfe said. It is exact. The next morning, Serena Colville returned. She looked different. Lighter, maybe. Her hair was down. She wore no jewelry except a small pendant. That looked older than she was. She sat without invitation and said simply, "Thank you." Wolfe inclined his head. She looked around the office, then back to him. "What do I owe you?" Wolfe waved a hand. "Mr. Goodwin will provide the invoice, standard rate, no surcharges." She laughed, once short and surprised. "I thought you'd quote something astronomical." "I did not act out of charity," Wolfe said, "but neither did I act out of greed. I value flavor and integrity. And your father's Biscotti embodied both." She nodded, quiet. "You will rebuild," Wolfe said. "I will." "You will be tempted," he added, "to cheapen the process, to expand too quickly, to accept shortcuts in the name of survival. Resist." She smiled. Are you giving me business advice? No, Wolfe said. I'm giving you dietary guidance. Your product should remain edible. She stood. I'll send you a fresh box when we're ready. Good. Archie will inspect it. I grinned. Hazelnut detail review, top-tier service. She shook my hand. Then, without another word, she left. Wolfe leaned back in his chair. Well? I asked. He closed his eyes. We have 3 days. Reprieve before someone else decides to poison their own ambition. Until then, veal for lunch. I stood and stretched. You think we'll hear from Marco again? No, Wolfe said. He will find another brand to exploit, or another assistant to ruin. Men like him do not learn. They pivot. And Lucy? She will struggle, Wolfe said. She believed herself righteous. That kind of conviction does not go quietly. He reached for the tart fork Fritz had polished to a mirror sheen. People, Wolfe said, are more fragile than recipes. Once broken, they cannot be perfectly replicated. That is their tragedy. And their charm. I stared at him. Want me to write that down? Wolfe shrugged. If you must, but not in the invoice. It rained the day the new Biscotti launched. Not one of those stormy deluges that sends pedestrians diving under awnings, but a steady grey drizzle that made New York feel damp at the seams. I took it as a good omen. There's something about launching redemption under grey skies. It tempers ego. And after the week Serena Colville had been through, tempered ego was probably the right seasoning. The new Biscotti box arrived at the brownstone around noon. Pale ivory with gold edging, elegant but not flashy. This time no ribbon, no bait, just a subtle embossed logo and a single printed word. Restored. Wolfe studied the packaging like a codebreaker, reading a diplomatic cipher. He didn't open it right away, that was his way. Delay added ceremony. Ceremony confirmed importance, and importance justified attention. This, he said, holding the box at arm's length, is either vindication or vanity. I waited. There was a ritual to these things. I didn't interrupt a man mid-contemplation, especially not when Biscotti were involved. Eventually, he peeled back the seal and lifted the lid. Inside, 6 perfectly aligned Biscotti nestled in fine, paper-like edible obelisks, chocolate hazelnut by the look of them. The scent was strong, toasted nuts, orange oil, dark cocoa, and something floral. Fritz stood in the doorway, watching with the reverence of a priest during communion. Wolfe took one, snapped it gently in 2, held the edge to his nose, inhaled. Then he bit and chewed and closed his eyes. I waited 5 seconds, then 10. On the 12th, he opened them again and turned to Fritz. They've corrected the grind. Fritz nodded gravely. I noticed that in the batch I tested. Better aeration, more elegant crumble, and they have returned to Piedmont hazelnuts. Indeed, Fritz said, and the chocolate, Italian origin this time. Wolfe set the rest of the Biscotti down. Tell Miss Colville it will do. That's it, I asked. No fanfare, no poetry. Good food, Wolfe said, does not require applause, only accuracy. But I saw it, the flicker of satisfaction behind his eyes. That faint curve of mouth that, in Wolfe's world, bordered on euphoric grin. I took one for myself and bit in. It was the same recipe, technically, but not the same product. This version wasn't just trying to impress, it was trying to atone. Serena say anything else in the note? I asked. Wolfe tapped the small envelope on his desk. She thanked me and included a request. Oh? She has a dinner planned, he said. A gathering for select partners, retailers, journalists. She would like me to attend. I snorted. You? I declined. Of course you did. She asked if you might come in my stead. I paused. As an emissary of integrity? As a buffer, Wolfe corrected, between her and any potential fools. I raised my Biscotti in mock salute. Add human Biscotti shield to my business card. You will attend, he said. Any particular reason? Yes, Wolfe said. Because Marco will be there. I stopped chewing. You're sure? I am never sure, Wolfe said. But I am correct. He cannot resist proximity to success, especially success he believes was his to begin with. So, this is surveillance. This is strategy, Wolfe said. Observe. Note who he flatters, who he pressures, what he says when Serena introduces you as my representative. Think she'll do that? She will, Wolfe said. She is proud, and pride is most visible when it is recovering. The dinner was held 3 nights later at a boutique venue in the Flatiron district, all exposed brick and filament bulbs. The kind of place where a cheese plate costs more than a cab ride to Queens. I showed up in a dark suit, no tie, just polished enough to seem official, but not enough to suggest I wanted to be there. Serena spotted me as soon as I entered. She was in navy, not green, which I took as a subtle signal. No longer trying. To match her father's brand, now shaping her own. Mr. Goodwin, she said, smile precise. I'm glad you came. I nodded. You're lucky the boss likes your Biscotti. Is he still refusing to attend events? He attended an orchid conference in 1997, I said. Still recovering. She laughed, then leaned closer. Marco's here. Of course he is. He showed up uninvited. I thought about sending him away. You did better, I said. You let him see what he lost. She took my arm. Walk with me. We made the rounds. I nodded at the financiers, the distributors, the cautious food critics who stared at their plates as though expecting betrayal in the garnish. Wolfe would have hated all of them on principle. Marco found us near the wine bar. He hadn't changed, still sleek, still unreadable, but his eyes flicked to me just long enough to register discomfort. Serena, he said. Congratulations. Really? Impressive recovery. She smiled thinly. It wasn't recovery, it was correction. Marco glanced at me. And I see Wolfe sent his watchdog. Not a watchdog, I said. More like quality control. He chuckled. Well, I'll give you this. You stuck. The landing. The new blend is surprisingly close. Not close, Serena said. Correct. He lifted a glass. To reinvention. She didn't toast. To truth, she said. He left 10 minutes later. Not abruptly, but not leisurely either. He knew the performance was over. The audience wasn't buying what he was selling anymore. Serena turned to me. That felt good. Don't get used to it, I said. Wolfe says satisfaction dulls vigilance. Then he must never be satisfied. Oh, he is. He just doesn't trust it. She looked around the room. Do you think he'd consider consulting again? I laughed. You mean regularly? For select projects? No, I said. He barely tolerates consulting his own wardrobe. Then I'll settle for you. I raised a brow. Let's not ruin a good Biscotti. She laughed again, lighter now. A woman learning what her own voice sounded like, separate from legacy and betrayal. I stayed an hour, then made my exit with the practiced ease of someone who'd rather be anywhere with fewer adjectives on the menu. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in the office, reading a monograph on Venetian vinegar. How was the theatre? He asked without looking up. Marco showed. Got scorched. Expected. Serena asked if you'd consider more work. Wolfe grunted. She is fortunate I do not require flattery. I dropped into the chair across from him. She's not bad, you know, underneath the polish. No one is bad underneath, Wolfe said. They are simply unripe or overripe. Careful, I said. You're getting philosophical. He finally looked up. Philosophy is merely seasoning. Too much and the dish is ruined, but the right amount adds depth, I finished. Yeah, I got that from your speech about time last month. Wolfe closed the book. People are much the same. Too much ambition they spoil. Too little they rot. Lucy Darnell was both. And Marco? Marco, Wolfe said, was hunger. Without taste. I nodded. And Serena? She has potential, and a product worth defending. That is rare. I got up to leave. Anything you want for dessert? Wolfe considered. Another biscotti, he said. The second from the left. It was the most honest. I fetched it and handed it over. As he bit into it, I saw him close his eyes again. Not just in satisfaction, in memory, in restoration, in flavor found again, and with that the brownstone returned to silence. The morning after the launch dinner, I found Wolfe in the plant rooms, perched among the orchids like a particularly well-upholstered gargoyle. He was pruning a paphiopedilum with the care of a surgeon, snipping dead tips with gold-handled shears, muttering under his breath in Latin. I waited until he finished the bloom in hand before speaking. Got a call from Saul. Wolfe didn't look up. He rarely calls without purpose. Speak. He tracked Ra. That got a reaction. Wolfe's head didn't turn, but his shoulders drew back half an inch, a sign of deep interest, roughly equivalent to another man leaping to his feet. He's in Geneva, I said. Staying under a corporate name linked to a food logistics firm, same one that handled Marco's test shipment 6 months ago. Wolfe dropped the snipping shears into a cleaning solution. Rug's not finished, then? No. He's migrating. That was always his intent, Wolfe said. Marco's schemes are small-time, but Rug's enterprise was continental. This was a rehearsal. I nodded. So we were the test market. Not we. Serena. Her company. Her family's formula. Wolfe, I said, leaning against the shelf, you think he's planning to do this again? Different country? Different brand? He is already doing it, Wolfe said. He will find another heir who doubts herself, another assistant hungry for validation, another Marco. There are always more. What do we do? Nothing, he said. Not unless it returns to our doorstep. Don't you want to stop him? I did, Wolfe said once, years ago when he passed through the import scene in Manhattan like a parasite through a feast. But parasites do not respond to confrontation, they respond to deprivation. When the hosts resist, the parasite weakens. So you want to let the industry wise up? Yes, but, Wolfe added, we can help them do so, quietly. That caught me off guard. You're suggesting proactive reputation management? I'm suggesting, Wolfe said, moving to the next orchid, a letter to a contact at Gastronom Quarterly. You will write it, under my name. No specifics, no accusations, just a reflection on the value of provenance, of maintaining culinary integrity in the face of commodification. A food ethics op-ed. Yes, Wolfe said. They will publish it. People will read it. Not everyone will understand, but those who matter, the makers, the purists, they will. Philosophy again, I muttered. Seasoning, Wolfe said without turning. And perhaps in this case a preservative. I left him to the orchids and went back downstairs. It wasn't the first time Wolfe had pulled out a long game, but it was the first time he'd used the pen instead of the pistol. Not literally, of course. Wolfe didn't own a gun. But every now and then he wrote something so precise it might as well have drawn blood. I drafted the letter. 3 paragraphs, tidy, pointed, and as cutting as a chilled sabayon. Wolfe made only 2 edits, changing the phrase ethical erosion to moral dilution, and removing a semicolon that, he said, threatened to tip the balance of a sentence not built to withstand it. I sent it off, and Gastronom Quarterly replied by evening. They would print it in the next issue. Wolfe didn't acknowledge the message. He just ordered trout with lemon and dill for dinner. That week the brownstone settled. No clients, no phone calls. Just the quiet, productive lull of a case concluded, and a city too busy feeding itself to realize it had nearly been devoured. Then, 3 days later, Annika Vaughn came knocking. I was reading the paper when Fritz opened the door. I heard her heels first, deliberate, no longer sharp. She looked different, not softer but grounded. The chef's coat was gone. In its place, a slate-grey jacket, a dark blouse, and a messenger bag slung over one shoulder. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said. "You're not," I said. "Just reintroducing myself to boredom." She smiled. "May I speak with him?" I led her to the office. Wolfe was already seated, of course, and raised a brow when she entered. No more than that. He didn't stand, didn't speak, just gestured for her to sit. Annika didn't waste time. She pulled a small package from her bag and placed it on his desk. "Don't worry," she said. "It's not Biscotti." Wolfe inclined his head. "Then what is it?" "Tea," she said. "A blend I've been working on. Something new. I thought you might like it." He didn't touch it, but he nodded. "Thank you." "I also came," she said, "to say something else." "Proceed." "I was wrong," she said simply. "About Lucy. About how much she needed to be seen. I should have noticed." "You could not have stopped her," Wolfe said. "No," Annika agreed, "but I could have stopped it from getting that far. I was protecting my product, not my people." Wolfe was silent for a moment. Then, "Recognition is not always a reward. Sometimes it is an antidote." Annika exhaled. "I'm rebuilding the kitchen team, training them differently, rotating development cycles, collaborative recipes, not siloed." "Risky," Wolfe said. "Necessary," she replied. He gave her a long look, then nodded once. "You'll survive." Annika smiled faintly. "That's the plan." She stood, offered him her hand, not expecting him to take it. But he did. A brief touch, nothing more. On the way out, she looked at me. "Tell Serena she was right." "About what?" "That you're useful," I grinned. "That's going on my tombstone." She left. Wolfe turned to me. "Do you believe her?" "I think she's trying." "That," Wolfe said, "is more than most." He paused. "Brew the tea." So I did. The aroma was subtle, green tea, fennel, something floral. Wolfe sipped, closed his eyes and murmured, "Acceptable," which from him meant she'd earned another chance. That evening, I walked to the corner store for a newspaper and came back to find the lights in the dining room dimmed and Wolfe already halfway through a plate of veal in saffron sauce. He didn't look up as I entered. "We are not done," he said. "With what?" "This case, its echo." "You mean Ruch?" "I mean," Wolfe said, "the appetite behind it, the hunger to control what others create. It is not limited to one recipe or one country." "You're sounding like a prophet." "No," he said. "Just a man who's been watching too long." He set down his fork. "You may think we resolved the Biscotti betrayal, but what we did was interrupt it." "Temporary?" "Perhaps, but so is every flavor." I poured a glass of wine. "So what's next?" Wolfe didn't answer. Instead, he turned back to his meal and said, as though to himself, "The thief of taste will always return. The trick is being ready when they do." And just like that, the case was behind us, but not forgotten, not by him, and certainly not by me. 2 weeks later, life at the brownstone had resumed its usual rhythm. Me dodging Fritz's demands to stay. Out of the kitchen, Wolfe pretending not to read the newspaper while reciting page 3 aloud, and the orchids blooming like they had secrets of their own. No clients, no complications, just the silence that comes after a well-closed case. Then came the box. It arrived by courier, no return address. Small, heavy, neatly wrapped in brown paper with a wax seal that looked like it had been pressed with a monogrammed signet. I wasn't expecting a bomb, but I wasn't ruling out a metaphorical one either. Anything anonymous that looked this, confident had either expensive sugar or slow-burning shame inside. I brought it into the office. Wolfe was seated, as always, behind his desk. He looked up once, saw the package, and lowered his book without touching his bookmark. A bad sign. He was interested. "Not from Serena," I said. "No card. Just the seal." Wolfe gestured. I opened it. Inside was a single biscotti. One wrapped in parchment tied with twine. No note, no flavor label, no explanation. Wolfe didn't touch it. He didn't need to. "It's a test," he said. "From whom?" "Someone who wants to know. Whether we're still watching." "Marco?" I asked. Wolfe considered. "Possibly, but not likely. This is too restrained for Marco." "Lucy?" "No. She would have left a manifesto." "Then who?" He leaned forward, elbows on the arms of his chair, hands steepled. "Someone. We haven't seen yet. Someone who watched the entire affair from a distance and now wants to play." "Another competitor. A mimic," Wolfe said. "A scavenger who watched the feast and now wants to taste the crumbs." I stared at the biscotti. "You're saying this is a job application?" "I am saying," Wolfe replied, "that it is bait. But unlike Serena's first offering, this one comes from someone who already knows the game." I stood. "You want me to dig?" "Not yet. First we taste." Fritz was summoned. With gloves and precision, he sliced the biscotti into 4 neat pieces. Wolfe took one and passed me another. We chewed. The flavor was complex. Not showy, not loud. Brown butter, lemon peel, a trace of clove, toasted pine nut. Just enough sugar to bind, not to sweeten. It was subtle, sophisticated, and most of all it was calculated. Wolfe said nothing for a full minute. Then, "Whoever made this knows how to manipulate memory." "How so?" "It is nostalgic," he said, "but not sincere. It evokes childhood. Without warmth, precision without affection. They want to impress, not nourish." I blinked. "You got all that from a biscotti?" "No," Wolfe said. "From the intent. The biscotti is merely the evidence." I turned the wrapping over again. "There was nothing, no watermark, no initials. You want Saul on it?" "In time," Wolfe said. "But first let us wait. The sender will follow up. They are seeking validation. If we do not respond, they will reach again." I returned the rest of the box to the kitchen. Wolfe resumed reading. As I left the room, he muttered, almost to himself, "Some predators do not pounce. They stalk. And when they appear at your door, it is not the first time they've seen it." 3 days passed. No calls, no letters, no clients. But a second package arrived, this time smaller. An envelope, handwritten in black ink, addressed to "The Mouth That Tasted Right." Wolfe did not flinch. Inside, a note on ivory paper, embossed, with a single emblem, a pine cone. The message read, "There is no theft in evolution, only taste misunderstood. Shall we discuss?" I looked at Wolfe. "That smell like an invitation to you?" "It smells," he said, "like a philosopher." "With a baking tray." I waited. Wolfe didn't respond right away. He walked to the window, where the sun was filtering through the blinds like slices of old gold, and stood for a long time. Then, without turning, "Call Serena." I did. When she arrived that afternoon, Wolfe handed her the biscotti and the note. She read both slowly twice. "This isn't mine," she said. "And it's not Lucy's." "No," Wolfe said. "It is someone who has watched you, who has tracked the fallout, who now wishes to enter through the back door. Should I be worried?" "Only if you intend to stop evolving." She looked at him sharply. "Do you think they're a threat?" "Eventually," Wolfe said. "If indulged." Serena frowned. "So what do we do?" "You ignore them. And if they push harder—" Wolfe smiled. "Then I will answer." She left with the remaining biscotti, promising to alert her team to any copycats. Any murmurs. And Wolfe resumed his ritual: book, chair, silence. But something had changed. Not in him, in the world outside. That night, Over dinner, Wolfe mused aloud. "There is a pattern to these things, Mr. Goodwin." I paused with a forkful of lamb. To Biscotti, to ambition, to theft, to culinary heresy. "Explain." "First they copy," he said, "then they compete, then they rewrite the rules. And you?" "I remain." I chewed, then said, "You sound like a warning label." "I am a warning," Wolfe replied, "and a guarantee. We..." Quite in silence for a while. Then I said, "You think there's going to be a second case?" "There is always a second case, but it's not here yet." "No," Wolfe said, "it's fermenting." The next morning the paper arrived with a small insert from Gastronome Quarterly. Wolfe's op-ed had been printed, front and center, of the food ethics column, on the matter of taste, provenance as integrity by Nero Wolfe. Wolfe read it once, then again, then set it aside without comment. I read it later. The closing line stayed with me. What we consume reveals not only our taste but our character, and what we steal reveals how little of either we possess. I clipped the article and pinned it to the board in my room, next to Wolfe's old case notes and a fading postcard of Sicily from a job we didn't talk about. Later that day, Wolfe had me write a short note to Serena. "Continue only what is worth continuing. Discard the rest." "Nalbibabu," she replied with a single line. "Thank you, I'm baking something new." I read it aloud. Wolfe only nodded. I didn't know if he meant good or brace yourself. With him, it's usually both. And so the brownstone returned, to its stillness once again, with only the faintest scent of pine nut and lemon in the air, like a memory being rewritten in the margins. The case of the Biscotti betrayal was over. But the taste? That lingered. The morning was crisp, one of those clear, hard-edged October days that make the city look like it's been sharpened. The brownstone was quiet, no orchids in distress, no mystery knocking at the door. But Wolfe was restless. He didn't fidget, he didn't pace, but I could tell. The way he tapped his fingers on the armrest, the way he reread the same page twice without turning it, the way he asked for tea at 11 instead of letting Fritz read his mind like usual. Something was still unfinished. I was in the kitchen, debating whether to open a second bottle of Fritz's elderflower cordial when I heard him say it. Low but clear, she lied. I didn't have to ask who. When Wolfe announces a lie, it's because the air's been heavy with it for a while, and he's finally found the source. I walked into the office. "You mean Serena?" He nodded, once. She was not the thief, nor the architect, but she was not merely a victim either. "Explain," I said, pulling out my notebook like we weren't supposed to be done with this case 2 sections ago. He closed his eyes. She came to us with a premise. Her family's Biscotti had been stolen. She was distraught, proud, and righteous. But there was something she didn't say, something she carefully avoided. I frowned. "What?" "She knew," Wolfe said. "From the beginning." I waited. She knew Lucy had begun compiling the recipe. Perhaps she didn't know the extent, but she suspected. Yet she did nothing. Why? He answered his own question, before I could open my mouth, because she wanted it to happen. My brow rose. "Now that's a twist." "Not a twist," Wolfe said. "A turn. She let the recipe be stolen, knowing it would give her leverage, proof to dissolve Marco's, agreement to retake control. She was gambling with her family's legacy, not to protect it, but to reclaim it under her own name. That's a hell of a theory." "It's not a theory," he said. "It's deduction. She called us after the fake Biscotti hit the shelves, not before. She let the breach occur. She let the betrayal flower. Then she came to us with it, packaged and bowed. But why? She had lawyers. She had options. She had none that guaranteed a moral verdict," Wolfe said. "She wanted me to declare her the wronged party, because that would be final, unquestionable, public if she needed it to be. I whistled low. So she used us? Yes, Wolfe said, cleverly, sparingly, and with just enough sincerity to be persuasive. I thought about that, about Serena's calm at the dinner, her quick forgiveness of Lucy, her renewed confidence in the kitchen, in the boardroom. I'd thought she'd grown. Wolfe thought she'd revealed herself. You want to confront her? I asked. No, Wolfe said. That surprised me. She did wrong, he continued, but not evil. She manipulated events to restore something she believed had been lost, not just a company, but herself. So she committed, what, emotional fraud? In a sense, he said. But she has earned what she took back, and she has built something new in its place. I nodded slowly. So we let it lie. Wolfe looked at me. Would you have done differently, Mr. Goodwin? I thought about it. Probably not, but I'd have tipped better, Wolfe allowed, himself the faintest snort. That afternoon I received a final package, this one expected, a slim envelope on heavy paper, Serena's handwriting. Inside, a thank you note, but not a thank you to Wolfe, to me. Mr. Goodwin, your questions made. Me reconsider. Your silence made me careful. Your presence made me honest. I hope you'll accept this, the first biscotti from our new batch. Flawed, humble. Mine. SC. Inside, a single biscotti, slightly misshapen, uneven on one end, a crack down the middle, but real, not perfect, not calculated, and maybe for once that was better. I didn't tell Wolfe about the note. I just ate it quietly, over the sink, while outside the window, the leaves turned gold. Later that evening, I brought Wolfe a tray, mushroom ragu on toast, a coddled egg, and a small piece of blood orange biscotti for after. He was still in the office reading Tacitus like it owed him money. He looked up as I placed the tray. We're finished then? I asked. Yes, he said. We are. I turned to go. Archie, he added. I stopped. Remember, he said, the best recipes aren't the ones that survive unchanged. They're the ones no one dares improve. I raised a brow. That another quote from Tacitus? No, Wolfe said. That one's mine. I grinned. And with that, the biscotti. Betrayal was truly behind us, no applause, just silence, and the last honest crumb.